The cold hit me like 1,000 needles all at once. I stood on the porch, barefoot, wearing nothing but my thin cotton nightgown. The snow was falling hard, covering everything in white. My breath came out in small clouds that disappeared into the freezing air. Behind me, I heard the lock click shut. I spun around and pounded on the door with both fists. "Dennis! Dennis! Open the door!" Nothing. I slammed my palms against the wood until they burned. "Please, it's freezing out here." His voice came through the door, muffled but cruel. "Then go to your parents." "Oh, wait, you can't. They're dead. Hope you freeze out here." Then silence. I stood there, shaking, not just from the cold, but from the shock of what had just happened. My own husband had thrown me out of our home in the middle of winter, wearing almost nothing. The temperature had to be well below 0. I could already feel my toes going numb against the icy porch. The wind cut through my nightgown like it wasn't even there. I pounded on the door again. "Dennis, you can't do this. I'll die out here." No answer. I looked around desperately. The street was empty and dark. Snow covered the cars, the sidewalks, everything. The street light at the corner flickered weakly. Not a single person was outside. Why would they be? It was nearly midnight in the worst cold snap of the year. My teeth started chattering so hard I thought they might crack. I wrapped my arms around myself, but it did nothing. The cold was everywhere, seeping into my skin, my bones. I looked at the window next to the door. I could break it. I could find a rock and smash through the glass and climb back inside. It was my home too. I had every right. I stumbled down the porch steps, my bare feet screaming against the frozen ground. I searched the snow-covered garden for something heavy. My fingers were turning blue. I couldn't feel them anymore. Then I heard a door open. I looked up. The house next door, Mrs. Porter's house. The old woman stood in her doorway, wrapped in a thick robe, her white hair pinned back neatly, even at this hour. "Child," she called out, her voice firm but kind. "Come here, right now." I hesitated. I barely knew her. We had exchanged maybe a dozen words in the 2 years I'd lived next door. A wave here, a nod there. That was it. "Now," she said again, "before you lose those fingers." I don't know if it was the cold or the shock or just the simple fact that she was the first person to show me any kindness in so long. But I went to her. She pulled me inside and shut the door against the wind. The warmth of her house wrapped around me like a blanket. I stood there dripping melted snow onto her clean floor, shaking so hard I could barely stand. Mrs. Porter didn't ask questions. Not yet. She disappeared down the hallway and came back with a thick wool blanket, which she wrapped around my shoulders. Then she guided me to a chair near a heating vent and told me to sit. "I'll make tea," she said. "Don't move." I couldn't have moved if I wanted to. My whole body felt like it was on fire as the warmth started bringing feeling back to my skin. My feet throbbed, my fingers ached. I looked down at my hands. They were red and raw from pounding on the door. There would be bruises tomorrow. More bruises. Mrs. Porter came back with a steaming cup and pressed it into my hands. The heat felt like heaven. "Small sips," she said. "Let your body warm up slowly." I nodded and took a tiny sip. The tea was sweet and strong. It spread warmth through my chest. Mrs. Porter sat down across from me. She didn't say anything at first, just watched me with those sharp grey eyes that seemed to see everything. Finally, she spoke. "That man is your husband." It wasn't a question. I nodded anyway. "And this isn't the first time he's hurt you." Again, not a question. I looked down at my tea. I didn't answer. Mrs. Porter leaned forward slightly. "I've lived in this house for 43 years. These walls are thin. I hear things." My face burned with shame. All this time she had heard us, heard him screaming at me, heard me crying. "I've seen things too," she continued. "The way you flinch when he raises his voice in the driveway. The bruises you try to hide with long sleeves in summer. I'm old, child. but I'm not blind. Tears spilled down my cheeks. I couldn't stop them. I'm sorry, I whispered. I'm so sorry for disturbing you all this time. Mrs. Porter's expression softened. You have nothing to apologize for. Nothing at all. She reached over and patted my knee gently. Now listen to me carefully, she said. My son is your husband's boss. His name is Gregory Porter. He runs the firm where your husband works. I stared at her. I knew Dennis worked at Porter and Associates. I knew it was a big firm, but I never made the connection. Stay here tonight, Mrs. Porter said. Stay as long as you need, and tomorrow, things are going to change. That man will be begging for your forgiveness before the week is out. I didn't know what to say. I didn't understand what she meant. How could anything change? Dennis had all the power. He controlled everything, the money, the house, my whole life. But something in Mrs. Porter's voice made me believe her. She spoke with a quiet certainty that left no room for doubt. She stood up and gestured for me to follow her. She led me to a small guest room at the back of the house. The bed was made with clean white sheets and a thick quilt. It looked like the most comfortable thing I had ever seen. Get some sleep, she said. We'll talk more in the morning. I thanked her, though the words felt too small for what she had done for me. She nodded and turned to leave. Then she paused at the door. What's your name, child? Clara, I said. Clara Bennett. Clara, she repeated. That's a beautiful name. It means bright and clear. You remember that. Then she closed the door softly behind her. I stood alone in the quiet room, still wrapped in her blanket, still holding the warm cup of tea. My body had stopped shaking, but my mind was racing. How did this happen? How did my life come to this? I thought about the argument that had led to this moment, the dinner that was too cold, the accusation that I didn't appreciate him, his hand grabbing my arm hard enough to leave marks. I thought about all the arguments before that one, all the cruel words, the put-downs, the times he reminded me that I had no family left to turn to. He was right about that. My parents died 3 years ago in a car accident. I had no siblings, no close relatives. When I married Dennis, I thought I was gaining a family. Instead, I lost myself. I sat down on the edge of the bed. Through the wall, I could hear Mrs. Porter's voice. She was on the phone with someone. I couldn't make out most of the words, but I caught a few. Tomorrow morning, my house. It's important. I wondered who she was calling. I wondered what she was planning. Part of me was scared. Part of me felt something I hadn't felt in a very long time. Hope. I finished my tea and lay down on the soft bed. The quilt was heavy and warm. I pulled it up to my chin and closed my eyes. Outside, the snow kept falling. Inside my old house, Dennis was probably already asleep, satisfied that he had won another argument. But something told me this wasn't over. Something told me this was just beginning. I woke up to sunlight streaming through unfamiliar curtains. For a moment, I didn't know where I was. The room was too quiet, too peaceful. The sheets smelled like lavender instead of the cheap detergent Dennis insisted I buy because it was on sale. Then it all came rushing back. The argument, the cold, the locked door, Mrs. Porter. I sat up slowly, my body aching in places I hadn't noticed the night before. My feet were sore and tender. My fingers felt stiff when I tried to move them. But I was alive. I was warm. I looked around the guest room. It was small but lovely. There were framed photographs on the dresser, a vase of dried flowers on the windowsill, a small bookshelf filled with old novels. Everything was clean and cared for. It was the kind of room that made you feel safe. I heard sounds coming from somewhere in the house, the clink of dishes, the whistle of a kettle. Normal. Everyday sounds that felt strange to me after so long in a house filled with tension. I found a robe laid out at the foot of the bed. Mrs. Porter must have put it there while I slept. It was soft and worn, the kind of robe someone keeps for years because it feels like home. I slipped it on over my nightgown and opened the bedroom door. The smell of breakfast hit me immediately. Eggs, toast, something sweet like cinnamon. I followed the smell to the kitchen and found Mrs. Porter standing at the stove, flipping something in a pan. She turned when she heard me. "Good morning, Clara. How do you feel?" "Better," I said. "Thank you. For everything." She waved her hand like it was nothing. "Sit down. Eat. You need your strength." She set a plate in front of me, scrambled eggs, buttered toast, and what looked like homemade cinnamon rolls. My stomach growled loudly. I couldn't remember the last time I had eaten. I had been too nervous to eat dinner last night, knowing Dennis was coming home in a bad mood. I ate slowly at first, then faster. The food was delicious, simple but perfect. Mrs. Porter sat across from me with her own cup of tea, watching me with a small smile. "When did you last have a proper meal?" she asked. I thought about it. I honestly couldn't remember. "That's what I thought," she said quietly. When I finished, she took my plate and refilled my tea. Then she sat back down and folded her hands on the table. "Now," she said, "I think it's time we talked." I nodded, though my stomach tightened with nerves. "I told you last night that I've heard things through these walls," Mrs. Porter began. "Arguments, crying, things breaking. It's been going on for as long as you've lived next door." I looked down at my hands. The shame burned in my chest. "I should have said something sooner," she continued. "I should have knocked on your door and asked if you were all right. But I told myself it wasn't my business. I told myself you would leave if it was really that bad." She paused. "I was wrong, and I'm sorry for that." I looked up at her, surprised. She was apologizing to me. "It's not your fault," I said. "None of this is your fault." "Maybe not," she said, "but I'm involved now, and I intend to help you." She leaned forward slightly. "Tell me about him. Tell me about your husband. I want to understand what you've been dealing with." I didn't know where to start. How do you explain years of marriage to someone in a single conversation? How do you describe the slow way a person can break you down until you don't recognize yourself anymore? But Mrs. Porter waited patiently. She didn't rush me. She didn't interrupt. So I told her how Dennis and I met at a friend's birthday party 4 years ago, how he was charming and funny and made me feel special, how he brought me flowers and opened doors for me and told me I was the most beautiful woman he had ever seen. I told her how things changed after the wedding, how the compliments turned into criticisms, how the charm turned into control, how he started telling me what to wear, what to eat, who I could talk to. I told her about the money, how he gave me a small allowance each week and made me account for every penny, how he bought himself expensive watches and golf clubs while I wore the same clothes for years. I told her about the anger, how he would explode over tiny things, a dish in the sink, a light left on, dinner served 5 minutes late, how he would scream at me until I cried, then tell me I was too sensitive. I told her about my parents, how they died in a car accident 3 years ago, how Dennis came to the funeral and held my hand and promised to take care of me, how he started using their death against me within months. Every argument ended the same way. He would remind me that I had no one else, no family, no options. Just him. I told her about the bruises, the ones I hid under long sleeves and high collars. He was always careful about where he grabbed me. Never the face, never anywhere people would see. By the time I finished, I was crying. I hadn't meant to say so much. I hadn't talked about these things with anyone, not even Linda. But once I started, I couldn't stop. It was like a dam breaking inside me. Mrs. Porter handed me a tissue and let me cry. "Thank you for telling me," she said softly. "I know that wasn't easy." I wiped my eyes. What do I do now? I have nothing. No money, no family, nowhere to go. He controls everything. Mrs. Porter shook her head slowly. "That's what he wants you to believe. But it's not true." She stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the snow-covered yard. "I told you my son runs the firm where your husband works. What I didn't tell you is that my late husband founded that firm 40 years ago. I may be a quiet old woman, but I still have some influence in this town." She turned back to face me. "I also have a very good lawyer, a woman I've known for 30 years. She handles cases like yours all the time. Divorces, protective orders. She's helped dozens of women get out of situations just like this. I stared at her. I can't afford a lawyer. You don't need to. She owes me a favor. Several favors, actually. I shook my head. This was too much. Why are you doing this? You barely know me. Mrs. Porter walked back to the table and sat down across from me again. Her grey eyes were serious. I had a brother once. His name was Robert. He was a cruel man. He treated his wife the way your husband treats you. Maybe worse. She stayed with him for 15 years, hoping he would change. He never did. She paused. She died in that house. Fell down the stairs, they said. But I knew the truth. Everyone knew the truth. My blood went cold. I swore after that I would never stand by and watch it happen again. I broke that promise when I ignored what was happening in your house. I won't break it again. She reached across the table and took my hand. You're not alone, Clara. Not anymore. I'm going to help you. My son is going to help you. And by the time we're done, that man will regret every single thing he ever did to you. I squeezed her hand, unable to speak. For the first time in years, I believed things might actually change. I slept better that night than I had in years. No footsteps to listen for, no tension in my chest waiting for the bedroom door to slam open, no walking on eggshells, just silence and warmth and the soft sound of snow falling outside. When I woke the next morning, I could hear voices in the kitchen, Mrs. Porter's voice, calm and measured. And a man's voice I didn't recognize, deep and serious. I got dressed quickly in the clothes Mrs. Porter had given me the night before. A simple sweater and pair of slacks that belonged to her daughter who lived out of state. They fit well enough. I walked down the hallway toward the kitchen, my heart beating faster with each step. I paused at the doorway. Mrs. Porter sat at the table with a man in a dark suit. He was maybe in his late 40s, with greying hair and sharp eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. He had a leather folder open in front of him and a pen in his hand. They both looked up when I appeared. Clara, Mrs. Porter said warmly, come in. Sit down. This is my son, Gregory. Gregory Porter stood and extended his hand. His handshake was firm but not aggressive. He looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Not pity exactly. Something more like understanding. Mrs. Bennet, he said, it's nice to meet you. I wish it were under better circumstances. Thank you, I managed. And thank you for coming. I know you must be busy. Not too busy for this, he said. We all sat down. Mrs. Porter poured me a cup of coffee without asking. I wrapped my hands around it, grateful for something to hold. Gregory opened his leather folder and looked at me directly. My mother told me what happened 2 nights ago. She also told me about your marriage. I want you to know that everything you say to me stays in this room. I'm not here as your husband's boss right now. I'm here as someone who wants to help. I nodded slowly. That said, he continued, I do have some questions about your husband's behavior, not just at home but at work. Anything you can tell me might be useful. I frowned slightly. I don't know much about his work. He never really talked to me about it, just complained sometimes. That's fine. Tell me what you remember. Even small details can matter. I thought back over the past few years. Dennis came home angry most days. He blamed his co-workers for everything. He said they were jealous of him, that they tried to make him look bad. He talked about taking credit for things, I said slowly. Projects that other people worked on. He would present them as his own ideas. He bragged about it like it was clever. Gregory wrote something down. He also complained about a man named Thomas. Said Thomas was always watching him, always checking his work. Dennis called him a snitch. Thomas Whitfield, Gregory said. He's one of our senior accountants. Very thorough. Dennis hated him. He said Thomas was going to ruin his career. Gregory nodded and kept writing. I tried to think of anything else. Then I remembered something from about 6 months ago. There was one night he came home really late. He was nervous, not angry like usual. He told me he had to take care of something at the office. He said he shredded some documents that he wasn't supposed to have. Gregory looked up sharply. Did he say what kind of documents? No, but he said if anyone found out, he would be fired. He made me promise not to tell anyone. He said it was my fault for asking too many questions. I felt sick just remembering it. At the time, I hadn't thought much about it. I was just relieved he wasn't yelling at me. Gregory closed his folder and leaned back in his chair. Mrs. Bennet, I have to be honest with you. Your husband has been on thin ice at my firm for over a year. We've had complaints from multiple co-workers about his attitude, his temper, and his habit of taking credit for others' work. But we never had enough solid evidence to take serious action. He paused. What you just told me about the documents changes things. That's not just bad behavior. That's potentially criminal. My stomach dropped. I didn't mean to get him in trouble. You didn't do anything wrong, Gregory said firmly. You answered my questions honestly. That's all I asked you to do. Mrs. Porter reached over and squeezed my hand. Gregory checked his watch and stood up. I need to get to the office. I have some calls to make and some files to review. I'll be in touch soon. He shook my hand again before he left. At the door, he turned back. Mrs. Bennet, what you did took courage. A lot of people in your situation would stay silent to protect themselves. You didn't. That matters. Then he was gone. I sat at the table, my mind spinning. Everything was moving so fast. 2 days ago, I was locked out of my house in the snow. Now I was sitting in my neighbour's kitchen while her son investigated my husband for possible crimes. Mrs. Porter refilled my coffee. You did well, she said. I know that wasn't easy. What happens now? I asked. Now we wait. Gregory will do what needs to be done, and while we wait, we start planning your future. She said it so simply, like my future was something I actually had control over. I spent the rest of the morning with Mrs. Porter. She showed me around her house properly this time. The living room with its big windows and comfortable chairs, the small library with shelves full of books, the garden out back buried under snow now, but beautiful in summer, she said. She told me stories about her husband, who died 10 years ago. He was a good man, she said, hard-working and kind. He built the firm from nothing and always treated his employees like family. That's why Gregory takes it so seriously when someone violates that trust, she explained. It's not just business to him. It's personal. Around noon, her phone rang. She answered it, listened for a moment, then handed it to me. It's Linda, from the bakery. I took the phone, surprised. Hello? Clara! Linda's voice was tight with worry. Where are you? Are you okay? You didn't come to work yesterday. I've been calling your house all morning and Dennis just keeps hanging up on me. I'm okay, I said. I'm at my neighbour's house. Something happened. What kind of something? Clara, talk to me. I looked at Mrs. Porter. She nodded encouragingly, so I told Linda everything. The argument, the locked door, the cold, Mrs. Porter taking me in. Linda was silent for a long moment after I finished. I'm coming over, she said. Right now. What's the address? You don't have to. Clara, what's the address? I gave it to her. 20 minutes later, she was at the door, pulling me into a tight hug. I knew it, she said into my shoulder. I knew something was wrong. I should have pushed harder. I should have made you talk to me. It's not your fault, I said. It's not yours either. She pulled back and looked at me. Her eyes were red. You're not going back to him, promise me. I thought about the cold porch, the locked door, the way Dennis told me to freeze. I promise, I said. And this time I meant it. The next few days passed in a strange kind of peace. I stayed with Mrs. Porter, sleeping in her guest room, eating meals at her kitchen table, helping her with small tasks around the house. She never made me feel like a burden. She never asked when I was leaving. She just treated me like I belonged there. Linda came by every day after her shift at the bakery. She brought me clothes from her own closet since I had nothing but the nightgown I escaped in. She brought me toiletries and snacks and magazines. She sat with me for hours, talking about everything and nothing. For the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe. But I knew it couldn't last. Dennis was still out there. He still had power over me. We were still married, and everything I owned was in that house next door. On the fourth day, Gregory called. Mrs. Porter answered the phone, listened for a moment, then handed it to me. "Clara," Gregory said, "I wanted to update you. We completed our internal investigation this morning. Based on what you told me and what we found in our records, we've terminated your husband's employment, effective immediately." I sat down slowly, my legs suddenly weak. "Terminated," I repeated. "Yes. The document destruction alone was enough, but there was more. Falsified reports, misappropriated client funds, things we might never have found if you hadn't pointed us in the right direction." I didn't know what to say. Part of me felt relieved. Part of me felt terrified. "What happens now?" I asked. "Now it becomes a legal matter. We've reported our findings to the appropriate authorities. There may be charges filed, but that's out of my hands." He paused. "I also want you to know that word travels fast in this industry. Your husband's reputation is finished. No reputable firm will hire him after this." I thanked Gregory and hung up the phone. Mrs. Porter was watching me closely. "It's done," I said. "He's been fired." She nodded slowly. "Good. That's the first step." I thought about Dennis. Right now, he was probably just finding out. Maybe security had escorted him out of the building. Maybe he was sitting in his car in the parking lot, stunned and furious. And then he would start looking for someone to blame. Me. "He's going to come here," I said. "When he figures out what happened, he's going to come here." Mrs. Porter's expression didn't change. "Let him come." I stared at her. "You don't understand. When he's angry, he's dangerous. I've never seen him this angry before. Losing his job, his reputation, he'll be out of his mind." "Clara," Mrs. Porter's voice was calm but firm. "I've dealt with angry men before. I'm not afraid of your husband. And you shouldn't be either. Not anymore." I wanted to believe her, but years of living with Dennis had taught me to fear his rage. I knew what he was capable of. We didn't have to wait long. Around 3 o'clock that afternoon, I heard a car screech to a stop outside. I was in the living room, and I went to the window without thinking. Dennis's car sat crookedly at the curb, one wheel up on the sidewalk. The driver's door flew open and he stumbled out. His tie was loose, his hair was messy, his face was red with fury. He stormed toward his own house first, disappearing inside. I could hear him even from here slamming doors, shouting my name. Then he went quiet. A moment later he came back outside. He stood on his porch and looked around wildly. Then his eyes landed on Mrs. Porter's house. On the window where I was standing, our eyes met. I stepped back quickly, my heart pounding. "He saw me," I said. "He knows I'm here." Mrs. Porter stood up from her chair. "Good. It's time we had a conversation with him." Before I could stop her, she walked to the front door and opened it. Dennis was already marching across the yard, his fists clenched at his sides. "Where is she?" he shouted. "Where's my wife?" Mrs. Porter stood in the doorway, blocking his path. She was a foot shorter than him and 50 years older, but she didn't flinch. "Lower your voice," she said coldly. "You're making a scene." "I don't care about a scene. She's my wife and I want her back. Now. Clara is my guest. She'll leave when she chooses to leave." Dennis stepped closer, towering over her. "Listen to me, old woman. I don't know what lies she's told you, but this is none of your business. She belongs in that house with me." "She belongs wherever she feels safe," Mrs. Porter said. "And clearly that's not with you." Dennis's face twisted. "You have no idea what you're talking about. Clara is confused. She's emotional. She needs to come home so we can work this out like adults." I had heard this tone before, the fake reasonableness. The calm voice that hid the rage underneath. He used it whenever he wanted to convince someone that I was the problem. But Mrs. Porter wasn't fooled. "I know exactly what I'm talking about," she said. I've heard you screaming at her through these walls for 2 years. I've seen the bruises she tries to hide. I know what kind of man you are." Dennis's calm mask slipped. His jaw tightened. "You don't know anything about our marriage." "I know enough. And so does my son." That stopped him. I saw the recognition flash across his face. "Your son?" he said slowly. "Gregory Porter, your former employer. I believe you met with him this morning." The colour drained from Dennis's face. For the first time since I'd known him, he looked afraid. "That was you," he said. "You did this. You got me fired. You got yourself fired. My son simply discovered the truth about who you really are." Dennis stood there, breathing hard. I could see him struggling to control himself. His hands were shaking. Then he looked past Mrs. Porter and saw me standing in the hallway. "Clara." His voice changed, softened. "Clara, please, just come out here and talk to me. We can fix this. I know I made mistakes, but I can change. I love you. You know I love you." I had heard these words so many times before. After every fight, after every bruise. He was always sorry. He always promised to change, but he never did. I walked forward until I was standing beside Mrs. Porter in the doorway. "No," I said. Dennis blinked. "What?" I said, "No, I'm not coming back. I'm not going to talk this out. We're done." His face hardened. "You don't mean that. You're just upset." "You're not thinking clearly." "I'm thinking more clearly than I have in years." He took a step forward, but Mrs. Porter held up her hand. "That's close enough. You're on my property now, and I'm asking you to leave." "Or what?" Dennis snarled. "Or I call the police. And then I call my lawyer. And then I call my son back and tell him about the threatening way you're behaving toward 2 women, one of them elderly." I saw Dennis look around. For the first time, he noticed the neighbours. Mr. and Mrs. Hoffman from across the street, standing on their porch. The young couple from 2 doors down, watching from their window. Everyone was watching. Dennis's jaw clenched. He looked at me one last time. "This isn't over," he said quietly. Then he turned and walked back to his car. He got in, slammed the door, and sped away. Mrs. Porter closed the front door and locked it. "Well," she said calmly, "that went about as expected." I was shaking, my whole body trembling. But I had done it. I had looked him in the eye and said no. For the first time in my marriage, I had stood my ground. The weeks that followed were the hardest of my life, but they were also the most important. Mrs. Porter's lawyer, a sharp woman named Helen Cross, filed divorce papers on my behalf within days of Dennis's visit. She also helped me get a protective order that kept him away from me, from Mrs. Porter's house, and from the bakery where I worked. Dennis tried to fight it at first. He hired his own lawyer and claimed I was lying about everything. He said I was the abusive one. He said I had stolen from him. He said I was mentally unstable. But Helen had prepared for all of it. She had photographs of my bruises that Linda had taken on her phone over the past year without my knowledge. She had statements from neighbours who had heard Dennis screaming at me. She had Mrs. Porter's testimony about the night he locked me out. And she had the records from Porter and Associates showing exactly what kind of man Dennis really was. The judge saw through him immediately. The divorce moved faster than I expected. Dennis didn't have the money to keep fighting. Without his job, without his reputation, he had nothing left. His own lawyer eventually convinced him to settle just to make it end. I didn't ask for much. I didn't want the house or the car or any of the expensive things he had bought for himself over the years. I just wanted my freedom. And I got it. The day the divorce was finalised, Linda took me out for coffee to celebrate. We sat in a little cafe downtown, and she raised her cup in a toast. "To new beginnings," she said. I touched my cup to hers. To new beginnings. It felt strange to say those words. For so long I had believed my life was stuck, that I had no options, no way out. Dennis had made me believe that I was nothing without him. But here I was, sitting in a cafe on a sunny afternoon, a free woman. Mrs. Porter helped me find a small apartment not far from her house. It was tiny, just one bedroom and a kitchen the size of a closet. But it was mine. My name on the lease. My key in the lock. I stood in the empty living room on my first night there and cried. Not from sadness, from relief. Linda helped me furnish the place with second-hand finds. A couch from a thrift store. A table from her cousin who was moving. Dishes and pots from Mrs. Porter's extras. It wasn't fancy, but it was cozy. It felt like home. I went back to work at the bakery full-time. The owner, a kind woman named Patricia, gave me more hours and a small raise. She said I had earned it. She said I was one of the best workers she had ever had. I had never thought of myself that way before. Dennis always told me I was lazy, careless, stupid. But Patricia saw something different. Linda saw something different. Maybe I was starting to see it too. Mrs. Porter became like family to me. I visited her every Sunday for tea, and she called me twice a week just to check in. Gregory stopped by sometimes too. He was quiet and serious, but he always asked how I was doing. He even offered to write me a reference letter if I ever wanted to apply for a better job. "You helped us more than you know," he said once. "The least I can do is return the favour." Spring came slowly that year. The snow melted and the days grew longer. I started taking walks in the evening after work, something I never could have done when I was with Dennis. He would have demanded to know where I was going, who I was meeting, why I needed to be outside at all. Now I walked wherever I wanted. I breathed the fresh air. I watched the sunset. I started taking night classes at the community college. Just one course at first, an introduction to business. I wasn't sure what I wanted to do with my life yet, but I knew I wanted more. More than the bakery, more than just getting by. The class was hard. I hadn't been in school in years. But I studied every night at my little kitchen table, and I passed the final exam with a score I was proud of. Linda threw me a small party at her apartment when the semester ended. Just a few people from the bakery and Mrs. Porter. We ate cake and laughed and talked about the future. "You should be proud of yourself," Mrs. Porter said as she was leaving. "You've come a long way." I thought about where I had been just a few months ago, freezing on a porch in my nightgown, pounding on a locked door, believing I had nowhere to go. "I had help," I said. She smiled and patted my cheek. "You had help, but you did the hard part yourself." Dennis came back one more time. It was a Sunday afternoon in early April. I was leaving Mrs. Porter's house after tea when I saw him standing on the sidewalk. He looked different, thinner, tired. His clothes were wrinkled and his eyes were red. I stopped on the porch, my heart jumping into my throat. "Clara," he said. His voice was hoarse. "Please, I just want to talk." I stayed where I was. "You're not supposed to be here. There's a court order." I know. I just needed to see you." He took a step closer. "I lost everything, Clara. My job, my house, my savings. I've been staying with my brother. I have nothing left." I looked at him. The man I had once loved. The man who had made me feel so small for so long. "I'm sorry for what I did," he said. "I'm sorry for all of it. I was angry and stupid and I took it out on you. But I can change. I know I can. Just give me another chance." I had heard these words before, so many times, and every time I had believed them. Every time I had gone back. Every time it had gotten worse. Not this time. "No," I said, his face crumpled. "Clara, please. No. You made your choice when you threw me out in the cold. You told me to freeze. You told me to go to my dead parents. You don't get to take that back." He started to cry, real tears rolling down his face. I felt something shift inside me. For a moment I almost felt sorry for him, but then I remembered the bruises, the cruel words, the years of fear. "Goodbye, Dennis," I said. "Don't come here again." I turned and walked back inside Mrs. Porter's house. I closed the door behind me and locked it. Through the window, I watched him stand there for a long moment. Then he wiped his face, got into his car and drove away. He never came back. Months later, I stood at the window of my own apartment looking out at the summer sun. The trees were green, the sky was blue. I had a vase of fresh flowers on my table that I had bought for myself, just because I liked them. I thought about the woman I used to be, the one who believed she was trapped, the one who thought she deserved the pain. She felt like a stranger now. I wasn't that woman anymore. I was Clara Bennett, bright and clear, and for the first time in my life, I was free.